All right, so today we're diving into something that you might not expect to be so interesting.
Yeah.
Phone calls at work.
Uh-huh.
You sent over this business English guide. It's all about phone skills, and honestly, I'm kind of excited to unpack it.
Oh, yeah.
We all know how important like a good phone call can be, but this isn't just about avoiding awkward silences or anything like that.
Right.
We're really talking about using your voice as a way to like build connections,
Yeah.
and project professionalism
Yeah.
and even close deals potentially.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's true. Phone calls are often seen as, this like simple everyday thing.
Right.
But in a professional context, they become these powerful tools.
Yeah.
Every word, every inflection,
Uh-huh.
it all contributes to the impression you're making.
So, okay, the guide jumps right into some common scenarios right away.
Yeah.
So things like transferring calls, taking messages.
Mhm.
You know those moments when someone's unavailable? It's
Yeah.
like those situations we all encounter, but sometimes kind of fumble through.
Yeah, for sure.
I can remember early in my career,
Mm-hmm.
I put a client on hold thinking it would just be brief
Yeah.
and completely forgot about them for like 10 minutes.
Oh, no.
I still cringe thinking about it.
Oh, we've all had those moments.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is that this guide, it doesn't just offer these like do's and don'ts.
Right.
It digs into the why behind those best practices.
Right. Like it has this vocabulary section
Yeah.
with phrases like, I'll just put you through,
Mm-hmm.
or can I put you on hold for a minute?
Yeah.
Which on the surface, they seem pretty basic.
Right.
But then it goes on to explain how this clear, concise language
Uh-huh.
actually builds trust with the caller.
It does.
Like it shows that you respect their time and reduces the chance of errors or miscommunication.
And that's where it gets fascinating.
Yeah.
If you think about it, clear communication, it's about more than just like conveying information. It's about creating a feeling of competence and reliability.
Right.
If someone is struggling to understand you,
Right.
or they're constantly having to repeat themselves, it erodes trust, even subconsciously.
So even on a simple call,
Right.
like to schedule a meeting,
Yeah.
the way you use language
Yeah.
can actually impact how the other person
Totally.
perceives you and even the company you represent.
Absolutely. The guide even delves into the difference between formal and informal language,
Yeah, I noticed.
giving examples like, is name around, versus, could you put me through to name?
Yeah, it seems so subtle.
Right.
But the guide argues that mastering this distinction is a key part of what it calls audience awareness.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's about tuning into who you're speaking with, a senior executive, a new colleague,
Right.
a potential client,
Yeah.
and adjusting your language to match their level of formality.
So it's not about being stuffy or overly formal all the time. It's
Right.
about being adaptable
Yeah.
and creating that connection through your language.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Now, the guide also goes deep on 3 example conversations,
Wow.
each showcasing a different scenario.
Okay.
What struck me was how the receptionist uses very specific techniques to kind of control the flow of the call and create a positive experience for the caller,
Right.
even when things don't go exactly to plan.
You know what stood out to me?
Uh-huh.
In one conversation, someone calls in with a problem,
Yeah.
and the receptionist says, "Oh, no, I'm so sorry about that. Let me see what I can do."
Yeah.
It's such a simple phrase,
Right.
but it shows empathy.
Yes.
And it immediately makes the caller feel like they're being taken seriously.
It's a brilliant example of what the guide calls emotional validation.
Oh, okay.
Even if you can't solve the problem right away,
Yeah.
simply acknowledging the caller's frustration or concern can make a huge difference.
It's not just about finding the solution.
Right.
It's about building that relationship.
Exactly. Making the caller feel heard and understood.
Okay, and that ties directly into one of the most important skills the
Yeah.
guide emphasizes,
Yeah.
active listening.
Active listening. Exactly.
It goes beyond just hearing the words.
Right.
It's about being fully present
Yeah.
in the conversation.
It is.
So it's not enough to just have a list of polite phrases memorized.
Right.
You actually have to be tuned in to the caller,
Mm-hmm.
picking up on their tone, their energy, and responding accordingly.
The guide gives some interesting techniques for this,
Oh, does it?
like using verbal affirmations.
Okay.
Little things like, I see,
Right?
to show you're following along, and asking clarifying questions to make sure you understand correctly.
Yeah.
It even suggests summarizing key points back to the caller,
Right.
which is a great way to prevent miscommunications
Huh.
and show that you're truly listening.
Okay, so we're not just passively receiving information.
Right.
We're actively participating in the conversation to make sure we're on the same page.
Yeah.
But what about those situations where the conversation takes a turn for the worse?
Oh, yeah.
You know, when you get a caller who's angry or upset.
That's where things get really interesting.
Yeah.
The guide actually has an entire section devoted to handling difficult callers.
Oh, wow.
And honestly, it's packed with insightful strategies.
Oh, it's not about just gritting your teeth and bearing it.
Right.
There are actual techniques to navigate those situations effectively.
Absolutely. And it starts with understanding the psychology behind the anger.
Okay.
The guide emphasizes the importance of recognizing that the caller's anger isn't usually directed at you personally.
Right.
It's often a symptom of a larger frustration or problem they're experiencing.
So it's about depersonalizing the situation.
Exact.
Not taking it as a personal attack.
Right. And then the guide dives into a whole range of tactics, from using calming language and validating the caller's feelings to setting boundaries and even knowing when to gracefully end the call.
Okay, this is starting to feel less like a basic phone etiquette guide and more like a strategic communication manual.
That's what makes it a true deep dive, because we're not just scratching the surface. We're really getting into the nuances of how to use phone calls to build relationships, manage difficult situations, and ultimately achieve our goals.
Oh, okay, so we've covered a lot of ground already.
We have.
The power of clear language, active listening techniques, and even some strategies for handling those tough callers.
Right.
But I'm noticing a theme here. It's not just about what we say, but how we say it right.
You're hitting on a crucial point.
Okay.
The guide actually dedicates a whole section to the importance of vocal tone.
Oh, wow.
It argues that your voice is like an instrument, and you need to know how to use it effectively to convey confidence, warmth, and professionalism.
So it's not just about the words we choose. It's about the way we deliver them. Our pacing, our inflection, even the subtle pauses we take.
Exactly. The guide even goes into the science behind how our emotions affect our vocal cords. And how things like smiling while you speak can actually change the way your voice sounds, making you sound more approachable and friendly.
I have to admit, I am totally fascinated by this.
It is fascinating.
It's like we're not just having conversations, we're conducting these mini symphonies with our voices.
Yeah, you are.
But before we get too carried away with our vocal virtuosity,
let's
get back to those example conversations.
Yeah, let's do it.
We touched on them earlier, but I think they're worth a closer look. They really bring all these concepts to life.
I agree.
What did you say?
They're like little windows into how these techniques play out in real-world scenarios. Each conversation highlights a different challenge.
Okay.
And it's fascinating to see how the receptionist uses those subtle skills we've been discussing to navigate each situation smoothly and professionally.
All right, so let's take a deep dive into conversation one, shall we?
Okay.
It starts with a pretty classic scenario. Someone calls in, wanting to speak with someone else. Seems simple enough. But I have a feeling there's more to it than meets the eye.
You're absolutely right.
Okay.
Even in these seemingly straightforward situations, there are subtle nuances that can make a big difference in the caller's experience and the overall impression you create.
So let's break it down moment by moment.
Okay, let's do it.
The receptionist answers with, "Good afternoon, ABC Solutions. How can I help you?"
Yeah.
Pretty standard greeting, right?
It is, but notice the tone. It's warm, welcoming, and professional. It immediately sets a positive tone for the interaction.
Okay, so it's not just about the words themselves. It's about the energy behind them. And then when the caller requests to speak to Maria Gomez, the receptionist asks, "Who's calling, please?" Now, that seems like a tiny detail, but I bet the guide has a reason for highlighting it.
Absolutely.
Okay.
It shows professionalism and respect for Maria. It also ensures a smooth flow of communication. Because Maria knows who to expect and can be properly prepared for the call.
So even in those initial moments of the call, we're already setting the stage for a more effective and professional interaction. But what happens when things don't go as planned? Like in this case, Maria ends up being unavailable. How does the receptionist handle that potentially awkward situation?
They say, "I'm afraid Maria's unavailable at the moment. Can I take a message?"
Okay.
Notice the language. Polite, clear, and solution-oriented.
Right.
They don't just leave the caller hanging. They immediately offer an alternative.
It's like they're taking ownership of the situation.
Yes.
And guiding the interaction towards a positive outcome.
Right.
Even when there's a bit of a hiccup.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's conversation 1.
Okay.
Ready to move on to conversation 2.
Lead the way.
This one seems a bit more complex.
Yeah.
A caller with a specific request that requires a bit more finesse.
Let's see what gems we can uncover in this next conversation.
Okay.
All right. Okay, so conversation 2 features Barry Watson. He's calling about a problem with a delivery.
Okay.
And this is where things can get a bit tricky, you know? Especially if emotions are running high.
Yeah, and they do.
Yeah.
Barry sounds pretty frustrated right off the bat. But what I find interesting is that the receptionist doesn't get flustered at all.
Right.
They just calmly ask for Barry's name and the reason for calling.
Right.
Which seems basic, but I bet that simple act of gathering information is actually super crucial.
You're spot on. It allows the receptionist to quickly assess the situation, you know? How urgent is it? Who needs to be involved before they jump into action?
Right.
It also gives Barry a chance to, like, briefly vent.
Right.
Which can sometimes help de-escalate things.
And then when they find out that Tom Sanchez, the person Barry needs to speak to, is about to go into a meeting, they don't just shut Barry down, you know. They say, can I put you on hold for a minute?
Yeah.
It's like a strategic pause.
It is.
That buys them some time to think.
It's brilliant.
Right.
Instead of rushing into a potentially unhelpful response, the receptionist creates a little breathing room to consider the best course of action.
Right.
And remember, in a real-life situation, that pause might only be a few seconds.
Right.
But it can feel much longer to the caller.
That's a good point.
Right.
So what happens next is super important.
Yeah, what happens next?
The receptionist comes back and says, I'm afraid Tom's unavailable right now. He's just stepping into a meeting. Would you like to leave a message?
Yeah.
Again, very polite, very clear, and offering a solution.
Right.
And this is where the guide's emphasis on active listening really comes into play.
Okay. The receptionist doesn't just passively take down Barry's message.
They engage with him,
right?
Asking clarifying questions like, and what company are you calling from, Mr. Watson?
Right. It's subtle, but it shows Barry that they're paying attention.
Yeah.
That they care about getting the details right. And they're not just treating him like another angry caller.
Exactly.
And then there's this moment where Barry explains that part of the order is missing.
Yeah.
And the receptionist says, oh, no, I'm so sorry about that. I'll let him know as soon as he's available.
Yes.
Perfect example of emotional validation.
It is.
Yeah.
The receptionist isn't just acknowledging the problem. They're expressing empathy for Barry's frustration.
Yeah.
It's a tiny phrase.
Right.
But it can make a huge difference in diffusing tension and building rapport.
It makes me think about how often we rush to fix problems without first acknowledging the emotions involved.
Right.
Sometimes just saying, I'm sorry you're going through this, can be more impactful than any solution we can offer.
Absolutely.
Right away. It's about recognizing the human element in these interactions.
Right.
We're not just dealing with tasks or problems, we're dealing with people, and their emotions matter.
Okay, ready to tackle conversation 3.
Let's do it.
This one caught my eye because it involves a caller who is following up on an email.
Oh, yeah.
Which seems so common these days.
It is. It's a great example of how phone communication often intersects with other channels like email or online chat. And it raises the question, how do we maintain that same level of professionalism and effectiveness across different mediums?
Exactly. So in this case, Maggie Chen is calling to follow up on a bulk inquiry that she sent via email to Amanda Gold.
Okay.
The receptionist first tries to transfer the call, which seems like the logical first step.
Right.
But when they realize that Amanda's line is busy, they seamlessly switch gears and offer to take a message.
Right.
And again, notice the language. I'm sorry, her line is busy at the moment. Can I take a message and have her call you back?
Yes.
Clear, concise, and offering a solution without any fuss.
That's it.
But what I found interesting is that even though Maggie's phone number is supposedly in her email signature, the receptionist still takes the time to confirm it. It seems like a tiny detail.
Yeah.
But I bet it speaks to a larger point about attention to detail and accuracy.
Absolutely. In any form of professional communication, but especially on the phone, where things can easily get lost in translation, accuracy is paramount.
It makes me think about how often we rush through these seemingly mundane tasks
Right.
assuming we already have the information we need.
Yeah.
But taking that extra moment to double check, to confirm those details can make all the difference.
It can.
When preventing errors and miscommunications down the line.
It's a great reminder that even those small acts of diligence and attention to detail contribute to the overall impression of professionalism and reliability.
So looking back at all three conversations, there were some clear takeaways.
Yeah.
First, it's clear that even seemingly simple calls require a strategic approach. It's not just about picking up the phone and winging it.
Right.
It's about being prepared, thinking ahead, and having a plan for how to navigate different scenarios.
I agree. And that preparation goes beyond just knowing what to say.
Okay.
It's about cultivating the right mindset. The guide subtly emphasizes this throughout the examples.
Yeah.
The receptionist always remains calm, polite, and solution-oriented, even when dealing with frustrated callers.
And that ties into the second takeaway, the importance of emotional intelligence.
Emotional intelligence, absolutely.
It's not enough to just know the right words. You have to be able to read the caller's emotions, respond with empathy, and adjust your approach accordingly.
Exactly. And the third takeaway, which is woven throughout all three conversations, is the power of active listening. It's about being fully present in the conversation, asking clarifying questions, and reflecting back what you've heard to ensure understanding and build a connection with the caller.
And what I love is that the guide doesn't just tell you to do these things. It shows you how, through those real-world examples, it's like having a script. But with the flexibility to adapt to different situations and personalities.
It's a great point. It's not about memorizing a bunch of phrases.
Right.
It's about internalizing those core principles of clear communication, active listening, and emotional intelligence so that they become second nature.
Okay, so we've unpacked the three conversations.
We have.
And I'm feeling pretty inspired.
Yeah.
But before we wrap up, I want to touch on something that the guide only hints at.
Okay.
But I think is super important, the power of our voices.
The power of our voices, yeah.
We've talked about tone and language, but I'm curious to explore this a little deeper.
Yeah.
What I mean is there actually a science to using your voice effectively on the phone?
There absolutely is.
Okay.
And it goes beyond just speaking clearly and avoiding, and the guide touches on this briefly, but it's worth diving into a bit further.
Okay.
Because your voice is like an instrument, and just like any instrument, it needs to be tuned and played with skill to create the desired effect.
Okay. I'm all ears. Tell me more.
It's like we're painting a picture with our voices, and the tone we use determines the overall mood and atmosphere of the conversation.
So if we want to create a positive and productive interaction, we need to choose our tone carefully.
Exactly.
Just like an artist would choose their colors.
Now, besides tone of voice, there are other subtle nonverbal cues that can impact our phone communication.
Okay.
For instance, the pace of our speech can convey a sense of urgency, enthusiasm, or even impatience.
That makes sense. I know when I'm excited about something, I tend to speak faster. Almost as if the words can't keep up with my thoughts.
It's a natural response. And when we're feeling stressed or under pressure, our pace might increase as well.
Right.
Which can unintentionally convey a sense of anxiety or urgency to the other person.
So even though the person on the other end of the line can't see our facial expressions or body language, they can still sense our emotional state.
They can.
Through the pace and rhythm of our speech.
Absolutely. And then there's the volume of our voice.
Okay.
Speaking too softly can make us sound unsure or lacking in confidence, while speaking too loudly can be perceived as aggressive or domineering.
Right. It's about finding that sweet spot.
Yeah.
A volume that's clear, confident, and respectful.
Exactly. And finally, let's not forget about the power of pauses.
Okay.
Strategic pauses can be used to create emphasis, to signal a transition in the conversation.
Right.
Or to give the other person time to process information.
It's like those moments of silence in a piece of music.
Yeah.
They're not just empty space. They're actually adding depth and texture to the overall composition.
Beautifully put. Now let's bring this all together. By paying attention to our nonverbal communication on the phone, we can enhance our message, build stronger connections, and create a more positive and productive experience for everyone involved.
Okay, I'm feeling like a nonverbal communication ninja.
You are?
But before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to address one more thing that's often a source of stress when it comes to phone calls at work.
Yeah.
Dealing with those unexpected or unscheduled calls.
Oh, yeah.
That can throw a wrench in our carefully planned days.
Ah, yes, the dreaded unscheduled call.
Yeah.
It's a reality of modern work life.
Right.
Especially in roles that involve a lot of client interaction or collaboration.
Mm-hmm.
But the guide offers some helpful strategies for handling these unexpected interruptions gracefully and effectively.
Okay, so let's say the phone rings.
Yeah.
And it's not a number I recognize.
Uh-huh.
My first instinct is usually to let it go to voicemail, especially if I'm in the middle of something important.
Right.
But is that always the best approach?
It depends.
Okay.
If you're in the middle of a meeting or a task that requires your full attention, it's perfectly acceptable to let the call go to voicemail and return it later when you have more time.
So it's not about being rude or dismissive.
Right.
It's about prioritizing our time and commitment.
Exactly. But if you're able to answer the call, try to do so in a calm and professional manner.
Okay.
Even if you're feeling a bit flustered.
So it's about taking a deep breath, gathering our thoughts.
Right.
And putting on our best phone voice.
Yeah.
Even if we're caught off guard.
Precisely. And once you've answered the call, politely identify yourself and ask the caller how you can assist them.
So it's about taking control of the conversation and setting a professional tone.
Absolutely. Now, if the caller's request is something you can handle quickly, go ahead and address it.
Okay.
But if it's going to require more time or attention, politely explain that you're currently unavailable and offer to schedule a time to connect later.
So it's about being honest about our availability and setting realistic expectations.
Exactly. You could say something like, I'm currently in the middle of something, but I'd be happy to chat with you later this afternoon. Would 3:00 p.m. work for you?
It's about offering a concrete alternative.
Yeah.
Which shows the caller that you're taking their request seriously and that you value their time.
Exactly. And remember, it's always better to reschedule a call than to try to rush through it and potentially miss important details or make mistakes.
So it's about prioritizing quality over quantity.
Exactly.
Ensuring that each interaction is productive and meaningful.
Well said. Now let's wrap up this deep dive with a key takeaway that I think encapsulates the essence of effective phone communication. It's not just about following a set of rules or memorizing a list of phrases. It's about approaching each call with a spirit of generosity, a genuine desire to connect, and a willingness to use our voices to create positive and impactful experiences.
I love that. It's about recognizing that phone calls are not just transactions. They're opportunities to build relationships, solve problems, and make a difference in the world.
Exactly. So the next time you pick up the phone, remember to bring your best self to the conversation. Listen attentively. Speak clearly and confidently, and let your genuine warmth and enthusiasm shine through.
And with that, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive into the art of phone calls at work.
It has been a pleasure.
I hope you found these insights valuable and that you'll apply them to your own interactions.
To you, our listener.
Yes.
We encourage you to reflect on your own phone habits and see where you can apply some of these techniques to level up your communication game.
Exactly.
Remember, every call is an opportunity to make a positive impact.
That's right.
So go out there and make those phone lines sing.
Yes. Until next time, happy communicating.